Hello Space Watchers, I'm Emma, the editor-in-chief of SpaceWatch.Global, and this is a new episode of Space Café Radio, your radio channel dedicated to emerging trends and live conferences in the space sector. Welcome everyone, hello Space Watchers, welcome to another episode of Space Café Radio. And today's guests are, I would say, an old friend of SpaceWatch.Global. We have interviewed him already last year. Is Bob Richards, the VP Space at TTTech Aerospace. Hello Bob, how are you doing?
Doing great. Good to see you again.
It's a pleasure for me. And together with Bob, we have Christian Fidi, the General Manager at TTTech Aerospace. Christian, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And let's get started. So 1 year has passed. This is not our first conversation with TTTech, but there has been some interesting progresses. We had finally the launch of Ariane 6, which was a really important milestone for Europe. And last year when we discussed it, we were still in the process of seeing it coming, several delays, but finally it happened. And I think it's very interesting to understand the perspective of industry of why an independent access to space is important and why is a successful European space industry necessary for European independence. Christian, what do you think? Over to you.
I think it's extremely important that we are very happy about this very solid and very flawless launch. And it's really great to see that the things on which we have worked for so many years performing that flawless. So for us, it was a big success. And I think it's very, very important for ESA, the European Union, to have this independent access to space back. And we are now looking forward to the increased launch cadence, which is currently built up.
Absolutely. But I wanted to discuss with you something interesting that maybe is also part of the TTTech background. We spoke about the access to space, the importance of it for sovereignty, but also we should maybe discuss the concept of technical competence, because of course, in order to be able to access space, you need to have the technical abilities, the human resources to do it. What do you think? What do you think is the role of the space industry when it comes to sovereignty?
I think it's very important that we are also here, for example, in Austria, in the Austrian industry consortia for space. And we are trying to push here, really building up the competences, building a cluster. I think it's very important that industry works together with the agencies, but also with the universities to really be able to build up this know-how and have the people available who can do things, providing access to space and providing also low-cost access to space, which was one goal of Ariane 6. But for that, you need the engineers who are able to manage the technical challenges. And we are very proud to have a lot of these very capable people in our company. And it's very, very important in these times where there is not enough resources available. And these baby boomer times are over, and we really need to backfill that. So it's very important to really bring that to the people, get the understanding, bring the people into the aerospace and space industry. And that's one of the very important topics that we are doing here. Also being in management, it's always important to have the right people in your team, but you need to build them up for a long time until they can really provide the needed technical competence and quality, allowing to do something like that. So we have worked starting in 2014 on Ariane 6. Yeah. So it's quite a long time, and it was a lot of effort, really. And now it's really great to see it being very successful and to have this access back, especially with such a great launcher, which is, I think, even if there are a lot of discussions about competitiveness, I think we made a big step forward in cost reduction.
Right. So definitely. Bob, over to you. I would like to touch point with you because we spoke last year. We discussed about several important concepts. We spoke about interoperability, modularity, scalability, secure and reliable connectivity. I remember those were two important topics. Have you seen any changes here? Have you seen any progresses from last year? What happened in the sector in this field?
Yeah, it's very good to see you again. I think we last spoke at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, and that was the sort of premier event to highlight space technology. And all of the things that you just mentioned are still the most important elements of advanced avionics and advanced space systems. And TTTech is right in the middle of all those technologies, and we're basically continuing along the same themes. Those themes are, for these advanced space systems, it's very important to have lightweight systems, because when you're sending something to the moon, every kilogram counts. And our system can transmit different classes or different services of Ethernet traffic along the same set of wires. So it immediately helps build a space station that is light enough to operate. The other common theme that I think we spoke about was always the need for more and more data. It seems like space, there's always advanced sensors, they produce more data, and you have to be able to transmit that advanced data and that more and more or larger amount of data through a central data backbone in your system. And that's where time-triggered Ethernet and TTTech products shine. And that's why it was chosen with the interoperability standards for any vehicle that connects to the Lunar Gateway, establishing a kind of international standard for connectivity to allow the safe transfer, or the transfer of safety critical data, safe transfer of data, as well as other types of less critical data, but still over the same set of wires. In the last year, it's just been more of the same. And I think Gateway is just step one to all the way going to Mars. So I think year by year, you'll see the same themes there, but greater and greater use of this technology.
And I also, if I remember correctly, Bob, remind me, like TTTech is on board on both European and US space programs, right? You play both in both fields.
Exactly. And other space agencies as well. The Gateway is part of the Artemis program, and under the Artemis program, many space agencies are involved for the future of spaceflight. And so it's not just the US, it's not just Europe, it includes other Canada, Japan, et cetera, et cetera.
And this is a very good point, because in fact, my next question was about agencies. So Christian mentioned a bit the private sector, the importance of Europe when it comes to the importance of Ariane 6 when it comes to sovereignty, etc. But I was wondering, considering the new dimension in which we're living is the new space economy that brings in the commercial sector, what do you think, Bob, is the role of space agencies? How is it changing? It is changing dramatically. We all know that. But how is it doing so, and why is this important? I would be very curious to know your opinion.
Yeah, the same trends are still there as last year, but it's been step by step towards greater use of commercial contracts, of commercial services, and even full up commercial systems like space systems. So you see, actually just recently, SpaceX launched 4 astronauts that was entirely funded commercially, and they did a spacewalk. I mean, that's a very visible example, but those trends are happening within each space agency as well, where they do more with commercial services and directly with commercial industry, replacing maybe some of the things that in the past they had done with government employees. So the trend is still the same: greater teamwork or collaboration between government space agencies and commercial industry.
And it's interesting also how, in a sort of way, before we saw government agencies supporting commercial activities, and now we see the other way around. We're having commercial activities supporting space transportation, space exploration, NASA, etc. So it's a sort of changing perspective in a sort of way.
Yeah. I think if we get together and talk again in a few years, eventually, I think the International Space Station is going to be replaced by a pure commercial system. And you're going to see a situation where NASA is not the major user of the space station, but a minor user. And I think this trend will continue on for many years.
And Bob, since you're here and since you are an American, I cannot resist to ask you the political dimension. There's going to be an election coming. We had election in Europe,
right.
and there's going to be an important election coming soon in the US. Do you think that the election could somehow have an effect on the space sector or on our running programs and the cooperation between the US and Europe?
Yeah, this is a big election. The presidential elections are the biggest of the U.S. elections, and I guess we're something like 40 days or something until the presidential election. It's hard to tell if there's some small change in emphasis in space policy, but I've got to think that the major trends are going to stay the same. And I see those major trends as further expansion of commercial space systems. I think the space agencies will continue as they've been continuing. The collaboration that is the Artemis program that we're so involved with. Artemis program now has 43 signatories, 43 different countries. So there's no change in emphasis that could negate those 43 countries' collaboration. So it's kind of independent of what happens with the election. That collaboration is going to continue on, and I think also it's still somewhat an unsafe world. So I think national defense will also dovetail with civil space because the high ground is important to national defense as well as important to space exploration and space exploitation, commercial space exploitation.
Let's hope it stays like that so we can keep collaborating on Artemis. And Christian, back to Europe, to the old continent, as I like to call it.
It's very interesting. I had a very interesting talk with a very famous econom here in Austria. And this person yesterday told me that the next 3 to 5 years, there will not be a big growth in the automotive sector, for example, in Europe. Yeah. And when you look into other areas which are currently struggling, the construction machinery or in general, the whole construction industry. So we are currently having a very hard time in that areas. And we're also having a very tough time in certain space paths or sectors, like the geostationary satellites is currently a very tough market. Yeah. On the other hand side, things like the commercialization of the space station, the exploration, even robotic, as well as LEO constellations are booming. Yeah, the launcher market is booming because of that. Yeah, we are currently looking forward in Europe to the first fully commercial launches. Yeah, I think ESA Aerospace is currently heavily working on their first launch. Yeah, Rocket Factory Augsburg had some drawbacks. PLD Space is working on that and has done some tests. Yeah, so it's really, there is a lot of momentum currently going on, and the next months and years will be very, very important for these kind of topics. So if Europe will really be able to more or less continue this commercial exploration and grow in that field. But this econom told me that the space market has significant growth and is the area to grow in the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. And is the place to be at. Yeah, so I think we can be very happy to be in a sector which has currently a very good outlook and will continue that. However, there are a lot of changes in Europe. Yeah, there's not a lot of risk capital. So we're working here also heavily to really get risk capital in to really be able to finance technology companies, also in the aerospace and space sectors. And I think this is a very important topic. And then another very important topic there is really the topic of how will the agencies transform, how will this continue, how will they support it, how will they commercialize it? Because there are programs which are very difficult, like in exploration, where you do one program in 10 years and it's it's one of a kind, versus you have a LEO constellation where you have thousands of satellites. So I think different approaches are needed to be able to overcome the challenges of these different programs. And I think currently so ESA is heavily working on that with all the member states. And I think it's currently very tough discussion about how to do that, how to handle space transportation,
Absolutely.
How the investment is done. So I think it's currently an unbelievable time. So we have this growth of the market, but we also have a lot of challenges that we need to overcome. I think they are on a good path. Yeah. I'm sometimes hoping that the European countries are working more closely together to manage it together, because I think that's very important. And a big part is also the defense sector. Yeah, how will the defense sector in Europe evolve by using space technologies or using satellites and communication? Yeah, there's a lot of activities ongoing, but we will see how successful they are. And I think, as Bob said, it always needs the teams on the intergovernmental agreement side, but it also needs the teams who are able to overcome this technology challenge and really bring then the spacecrafts and the operations up and be really able to handle these challenges and be up to the task. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as you say, Christian, Europe is in front of challenges and opportunities. And one of the challenges, as you mentioned, is this kind of national fragmentation. What do you think that Europe institution can do or should do to support and push the space industry forward? Because this is one of the nut of the problems, isn't it? The fact that we have several fragmented interests and we cannot move forward all together.
Yeah. I mean, I was very happy to see over the past years that the European Commission and ESA were collaborating more. Yeah. And that also the countries after the Ukraine war started have worked very closely together. Now we are seeing a lot of political influence that is very hard to manage between the different countries. But in that topic, we really need to work together. We have, I think, great partnerships with the US, but also with a lot of other countries. And the Artemis program is one of these programs that is really a shining star of international collaboration or cooperation, which is very important as we headed with the ISS. Yeah. And I think the more countries to join, the more partners are there, the more closer they work together. This will be really, really helpful. On the other hand side, we have excellent talent in engineering, in economics, in other areas, which are needed to be able to lift off these services that are needed. So I think there is a lot of very good basics and prerequisites in place, but I think we really need to work on taking more risk. Yeah. I think the US shows a lot of times that successful companies like SpaceX or Blue Origin or others, they are taking a lot of risk, but for taking risk, you need a lot of capital. And sometimes it's not easy for us, right? Because we are a very small player in the space market. But allowing us to take risk means that we have the backing, the financial backing. And sometimes you need to get it from agencies or from venture capital funds or so on. And this is not an easy topic within Europe. We had some discussions here with different kind of industry and politicians. And it's unbelievable how much money people are having on their bank accounts, and they are not moving it away from there.
Spend them. It's a profound difference from between the US and Europe, absolutely. The fact that we are money saving in a sort of way, but we keep them in the bank account to rotten. Bob, last question for you. Space is now global and the war has been changing completely. You saw the changes of this sector through the decades. What is, in your opinion, the next steps for space and for TTTech also, both?
Sure. So this is a big year upcoming for launch vehicles. We saw SpaceX, of course, has been successful for years. The United Launch Alliance has done a major upgrade of their vehicle, and Blue Origin is about to fly the New Glenn. And TTTech has the technology and is very interested in the launch vehicle market. And just in general, that first mile to space is important for the entire space ecosystem. You have to get to space before you can do things in space. So I'm very excited about what's happening in the launch vehicle market and the growth that's happening there. I'm also very excited about the continued work that we do on the Gateway program, orbiting the lunar. Eventually, we'll orbit the moon and provide a transportation node for people going to the moon. And advanced technology comes from working those really hard problems. Christian talked about the financial aspect of taking risk, and it takes capital, et cetera, but you also need a particularly difficult problem to work on to advance the technology. And then we'll see that technology trickle down into the easier problems like low Earth orbit and even into aviation and terrestrial things. So doing those hard things with the Artemis program, I just think is super important, and that's a look ahead for the next couple of years.
Fantastic. Bob, Christian, thanks so much for being here with me today. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to the next year updates and to the next coming news from Artemis and the Gateway. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
If you want to keep the pulse of the space industry, please visit our website at www.SpaceWatch.Global. Subscribe to our newsletters, and of course, don't forget to become a Space Watcher. I'm Emma Gatti, Editor-in-Chief of SpaceWatch Global, your independent perspective on space. See you next time. Ciao!